The moment you decide that your peace is non-negotiable is the moment you begin to truly live. Look at me. I stand before you not as someone who has never faced opposition, but as someone who has discovered the secret to living above the noise. The greatest prison in this world is not built with concrete and steel. It is built in the mind that reacts to everything. Every day, millions walk through life completely controlled by circumstances, words, and the actions of others. They are like leaves blown by every wind of opinion and criticism. But you were not designed to be controlled by external forces. You were designed to be the master of your responses, the captain of your emotional ship. I traveled to Japan several years ago and observed something fascinating about their bamboo. During powerful storms, while mighty oaks would crack and fall, the bamboo would bend almost to the ground, but never break. When the storm passed, it would stand tall again, unbothered by what just occurred. This is not weakness. This is ultimate strength. The ability to experience pressure without being destroyed by it. Today I'm going to show you how to develop this bamboo mentality, to learn to act as if nothing and no one bothers you, not because you're insensitive, but because you've discovered a higher way of living. By the time we finish, you will have the tools to walk through a storm of criticism, disappointment, and opposition with your peace intact. Your life changes the moment you decide that your peace is not dependent on external circumstances, but on internal decisions. Are you ready to make that decision today? Let me tell you something powerful. Between every stimulus and your response lies a space. In that space lies your freedom and your power to choose your response. In your response lies your growth and your freedom. Most people don't understand this fundamental principle. When someone says something negative, they react immediately. When circumstances don't go their way, they spiral into anxiety or anger. But these reactions are not inevitable. They are choices that have become habits. Your brain has developed neural pathways like highways of thought that automatically direct traffic to certain emotional destinations. When someone criticizes you, that information travels down a well-worn path to feelings of hurt, defensiveness, or anger. But here's the revolutionary truth. You can build new roads. I once coached a business executive who would become visibly agitated whenever his ideas were questioned in meetings. His face would redden, his voice would rise, and he would interrupt others. This reaction had cost him several promotions. When we analyzed his response mechanism, we discovered that questioning his ideas triggered a childhood memory of being ridiculed by his father. Once he understood this connection, he could create space between stimulus and response, a space where he could choose differently. The difference between reacting and responding is the difference between slavery and freedom. Reaction is automatic and unconscious. Response is intentional and chosen. Reaction comes from programming. Response comes from principle. Think about it. Have you ever said something in anger that you later regretted? Have you ever made a decision while upset that you wouldn't have made when calm? These moments illustrate the cost of reaction versus the value of response. Let me give you a practical example. Imagine two employees receiving identical criticism from their boss. The first immediately becomes defensive, argues back, and leaves the interaction feeling victimized and angry. The second pauses, listens fully, thanks the boss for the feedback, and asks clarifying questions to understand how to improve. The first employee spends days bothered by the interaction, while the second has already begun implementing changes that will lead to growth. Same stimulus, entirely different outcomes, based solely on the response chosen. Your ability to choose your response is your greatest power. No one, I repeat, no one can make you feel anything without your permission. When you truly internalize this principle, you begin to live in a new dimension of freedom where external forces lose their power over your internal state. Your mind is the most valuable piece of real estate you will ever own. Yet most people allow just anyone to build whatever they want on their mental property. They allow negative comments to construct mansions of insecurity. They permit past failures to establish shopping malls of doubt. They let other people's opinions create entire neighborhoods of self-limitation. Today, I'm serving you with an eviction notice. It's time to reclaim the sovereignty of your mind. Mental sovereignty means establishing clear boundaries around your thoughts. It means deciding what can enter and what must remain outside. It means understanding that while you cannot control what happens to you, you maintain absolute control over how you interpret and respond to what happens. Let me share something powerful. External forces, people, circumstances, social media, news, all compete for control of your mental territory, because whoever controls your mind controls your life. Think about it. When someone makes you angry, they essentially control your emotional state. When you worry about someone's opinion, they occupy space in your mind rent-free. Breaking the pattern of emotional dependency requires awareness and decision. You must first become aware of when you're giving away your power. Notice when your mood shifts based on a comment. Observe when your day is ruined because of someone's attitude. These are moments of surrendered sovereignty. I want you to try something right now. Close your eyes for a moment and visualize your mind as a kingdom with high walls. At the gate of this kingdom stands the God. This God is your awareness. This God's job is to inspect everything that wants to enter your mental kingdom and decide whether it aligns with your values and serves your purpose. If it doesn't, the God refuses entry. This is not about denial or avoidance. It's about discernment and choice. It's about understanding that not every thought deserves your attention. Not every comment deserves your emotion. And not every person deserves your reaction. I worked with a talented musician whose performance anxiety was crippling her career. Every negative review, every misnote, every perceived judgment from the audience would dominate her thoughts for weeks. We worked on establishing mental sovereignty through a simple but powerful practice. For every negative thought that attempted to enter her mind, she would consciously decide if it contained useful information for improvement or if it was merely destructive criticism. If the former, she would extract the lesson and discard the emotional packaging. If the latter, she would simply acknowledge it and refuse its residence in her mental space. Within months, her performance anxiety diminished dramatically, not because the external pressures disappeared, but because she established sovereignty over her responses to them. Your mind is your domain. Guard it jealously. Be selective about what you allow to take root there. Practice the art of mental eviction, removing thoughts that don't serve your highest purpose. This is the foundation of living unbothered. Now, let's talk about environmental design. Not of your physical space, but of your internal landscape. Just as you would carefully design your home for optimal living, you must intentionally design your internal environment for optimal thinking and feeling. The most powerful environments are created from the inside out, not the outside in. Most people attempt to control everything in the external world to feel peace. But true masters create peace internally regardless of external conditions. Building mental fortifications begins with understanding that your thoughts create your feelings influence your actions, and your actions determine your results. To change your results, you must start by changing your thoughts. The most important conversation you will ever have is the conversation you have with yourself. About yourself, when you buy yourself, your self-contract, what you say to yourself day in and day out, is either building you up or tearing you down. It's either preparing you to be unbothered or making you hypersensitive to every slight and setback. I want to share with you 3 techniques for maintaining inner calm regardless of outer chaos. First, practice thought replacement. When a bothering thought enters your mind, immediately replace it with its positive counterpart. If someone criticizes your work and you think, maybe I'm not good enough, immediately replace it with, I am constantly growing and improving, and feedback helps me develop. Second, implement pattern interruption. When you feel yourself beginning to be bothered, your heart rate increases, your breathing becomes shallow, you feel that familiar tension, physically change your state. Stand up if you're sitting. Take 3 deep breaths. Splash cold water on your face. These physical interruptions break the developing emotional pattern and give you a fresh starting point. Third, utilize perspective expansion. When something bothers you, ask yourself, will this matter in 5 hours, 5 days, 5 months, 5 years? This question immediately broadens your perspective and reduces the apparent size of the bothering stimulus. Let me tell you about Nelson Mandela, who spent 27 years in prison, yet emerged without bitterness to lead his nation toward reconciliation. During his imprisonment on Robben Island, guards would routinely attempt to break his spirit through humiliation and harsh treatment. Mandela later revealed that he maintained his inner calm by focusing on what they could not take from him: his mind, his principles, his hope for the future. He created an internal environment so powerful that external imprisonment couldn't compromise it. While most of us will never face such extreme circumstances, we all encounter our own versions of prison, situations, and people that seem designed to rob us of our peace. By intentionally designing your internal environment through careful thought management, you create a sanctuary that external forces cannot easily penetrate. Remember this, your internal environment will always overpower your external environment if you develop it with intention and consistency. Your value system is your personal constitution. It governs every decision you make and every reaction you have. What bothers you reveals what you value. And not everything deserves equal value in your life. When something bothers you, ask yourself, why does this bother me? What value is being threatened or violated? This simple question brings clarity to your reactions and gives you the power to reassess whether that value is serving your highest good. For example, if you're bothered when people don't respond to your messages immediately, you might value promptness and respect. That's not inherently wrong, but you might also be placing excessive value on external validation and control. Values that set you up for constant frustration in a world you cannot control. The priority hierarchy. What you value most to least determines your peace threshold. If you value others' opinions above your own self-acknowledge, you will always be at the mercy of external judgment. If you value perfection above progress, you'll be bothered by every inevitable mistake. There's a direct connection between your sense of purpose and what distracts you. The clearer you are about your purpose, the less bothered you'll be by matters unrelated to that purpose. Purpose acts as a filter, automatically sorting relevant concerns from irrelevant ones. I want you to try this value clarification exercise. Take out a piece of paper and write down the 5 things that bothered you most in the past week. Next to each one, write what value was being threatened. Now ask yourself, is this value essential to my purpose and well-being? Is this value serving me, or am I serving it? Is this value aligned with who I want to become? This exercise often reveals that many of our reactions stem from values we've inherited rather than intentionally chosen. Values from our upbringing, culture, or social circles that we've never questioned. I once worked with a community leader who was constantly bothered by criticism of his initiatives. Through this exercise, he discovered he valued universal approval, an impossible standard that was sabotaging his effectiveness. When he shifted his value to meaningful impact, regardless of popularity, his entire approach changed. He still heard the same criticisms, but they no longer bothered him because they weren't threatening a core value. Remember, you have the power to reassess and reconstruct your value system at any time. This isn't about becoming callous or uncaring. It's about ensuring that what you care about actually deserves your precious emotional energy. Strategic indifference is the art of selectively caring, choosing with intention where to invest your emotional energy and where to deliberately withhold it. This is not about becoming cold or unfeeling. It's about becoming wise in your emotional investments. Not everything deserves your emotional engagement. Not every battle requires your participation. Not every opinion warrants your consideration. The person who is bothered by everything will accomplish nothing significant because their energy is constantly depleted by minor issues. To practice strategic indifference, you must first identify battles worth fighting. Ask yourself these questions before engaging emotionally. Does this situation align with my purpose and values? Can I influence or change this situation? Will the outcome matter 1 year from now? Is my engagement likely to produce a positive result? If the answer to these questions is no, then strategic indifference is the appropriate response. Let me teach you a technique I call calculated detachment. This involves mentally stepping back from a situation and observing it as if you were watching a movie rather than starring in it. Notice the details, the patterns, the motivations at play, but without emotional investment. This perspective allows you to respond with wisdom rather than reaction. Strategic indifference has powerful real-world applications. In business negotiations, the person who cares less often has the upper hand. In interpersonal conflicts, the person who maintains emotional equilibrium usually makes better decisions. In creative pursuits, indifference to criticism often leads to more authentic expression. Consider the example of a successful entrepreneur I mentored who was constantly distracted by competitors' moves. Every new product or marketing campaign from a rival would send him into a reactive spiral, causing him to abandon his own vision to counteract theirs. When he learned strategic indifference, he established a policy. He would only review competitor activities quarterly with a specific purpose of industry awareness, not reaction. This simple practice freed enormous creative and strategic energy that he redirected into innovation rather than reaction. Strategic indifference is a superpower in a world designed to capture and monetize your attention and emotional energy. By choosing what bothers you and what doesn't, you reclaim control of your most precious resources, your focus and your peace. Understanding why others try to bother you is crucial to remaining unbothered. In most cases, people who attempt to provoke a reaction from you are revealing their own insecurities, not your inadequacies. When someone tries to bother you through criticism, gossip, or disrespect, they are often engaging in a power play, attempting to elevate themselves by diminishing you. Their behavior is rarely about you. It's almost always about their own need for significance, security, or control. This understanding allows you to break the cycle of social manipulation. When you recognize that someone's attempt to bother you is actually their attempt to extract emotional energy from you, you can consciously choose not to supply that energy. Without your reaction, their behavior loses its power and purpose. This doesn't mean isolating yourself or ending relationships. It means establishing healthy boundaries within those relationships. You can care about people without caring about every opinion they express. You can love people without needing their constant approval. You can interact with difficult individuals without absorbing their negativity. Effective communication in difficult interactions begins with managing your own state. Before responding to potentially bothering situations, ensure you're operating from a place of calm clarity rather than reactive emotion. Then communicate with assertive respect, clearly expressing your perspective and boundaries without attacking or defending. I once observed a remarkable demonstration of this principle during a high-stakes community meeting. One speaker was repeatedly interrupted and subtly insulted by another participant, clearly attempting to derail the discussion. Instead of becoming defensive or angry, the speaker paused, smiled, and said, "I appreciate your passion on this issue. I'd like to finish my thought, and then I'd be genuinely interested in hearing your complete perspective." This response acknowledged the interrupter while firmly maintaining boundaries. It diffused tension rather than escalating it and kept the focus on solving the problem rather than managing personalities. By understanding social dynamics, you recognize when others are attempting to use your reactions to fulfill their own emotional needs. This awareness gives you the freedom to choose responses that maintain your peace while still engaging effectively with others. Knowledge without application is merely entertainment. To truly learn to act as if nothing and no one bothers you, you must implement daily practices that transform these principles from concepts into habits. First, establish morning sovereignty, a practice of setting your mental, emotional state before engaging with the world. Spend the first 15-30 minutes of your day in activities that center and strengthen you. Meditation, journaling, exercise, reading material that inspires you. This creates a reservoir of peace that makes you less reactive throughout the day. I call this winning the morning to win the day. When you establish sovereignty in the quiet moments, you can maintain it in the chaotic ones. Second, create response protocols. Predetermine decisions about how you respond to common triggering situations. For instance, when criticized, I will pause, thank the person for their input, and tell them I'll consider their perspective. Having these protocols in place prevents automatic reactions and gives you a ready alternative. These are your emotional emergency procedures. Just as pilots have protocols for every possible emergency before they encounter one. Third, practice progressive desensitization. Intentionally expose yourself to small versions of situations that typically bother you while maintaining your composure. Like building physical immunity through controlled exposure, this builds emotional immunity to provocations. Start with low-stakes scenarios and gradually work up to more challenging ones. If criticism bothers you, begin by asking trusted friends for honest feedback about non-sensitive topics before tackling more personal areas. Fourth, implement regular reflection. At the end of each day, review moments when you were bothered and moments when you maintained your peace. Ask yourself, what was different about these situations? What strategies worked? What can I improve tomorrow? This reflection turns each day into a laboratory for your emotional mastery. Without reflection, experience is just an event. With reflection, it becomes education. Fifth, create an unbothered accountability network. A small group of people who understand your journey and who will lovingly call you out when you react rather than respond. Share your goals with them and give them permission to ask questions like, was that response aligned with who you're becoming? These external perspectives can spot blind spots in your development that you might miss. Measuring your progress is essential but requires the right metrics. Don't measure success by the absence of bothering stimuli. Measure it by your decreasing reaction to those stimuli. Notice when something that would have ruined your day last month now barely registers as an annoyance. That's tangible growth. Document this progress in a journal to remind yourself how far you've come when facing setbacks. Handle inevitable setbacks with self-compassion. You will have moments when you react rather than respond, when something bypasses your developing sovereignty and triggers a reaction. When this happens, don't compound the problem by being bothered that you were bothered. Instead, use the experience as valuable feedback about areas that need strengthening. Remember that mastery isn't perfection, it's recovering faster each time you fall. I worked with a school principal implementing these strategies in an extremely challenging environment. She began by identifying her 3 most common triggering situations: confrontational parents, district policy changes, and staff resistance to new initiatives. For each, She developed specific response protocols and practiced them daily. Within 3 months, her leadership team noticed such a dramatic change in her composure that they requested the same training. By the end of the year, the entire school culture had shifted from reactive to responsive, with measurable improvements in staff retention, parent satisfaction, and student performance. Remember, consistency in small practices creates profound shifts over time. You don't become unbothered through one dramatic change, but through hundreds of small choices to respond rather than react. The path to becoming unbothered isn't a sprint, it's a daily practice that compounds over time into an unshakable foundation of inner peace. As we conclude this journey together, envision the life that awaits you when you master the art of being unbothered, not from apathy, but from strength. Imagine moving through your day with an internal peace that doesn't depend on external circumstances. Picture yourself in challenging situations that once would have triggered stress, anxiety, or anger, now navigating them with calm clarity. See yourself making decisions based on values and purpose rather than reactions and emotion. This is complete freedom. The freedom to choose your responses regardless of stimuli, the freedom to maintain your course regardless of opposition, the freedom to preserve your peace regardless of provocation. The benefits of this unbothered living extend far beyond personal peace. When you're not constantly reacting, you have energy for creation. When you're not defending yourself against every perceived slight, you have capacity for meaningful connection. When you're not distracted by minor irritations, you can focus on major impact. Your leadership becomes more effective because you respond strategically rather than reactively. Your relationships deepen because you listen without defensiveness. Your decisions improve because they come from principle rather than impulse. The time to begin is now, not when circumstances improve, not when difficult people leave your life, not when you feel ready. Now, with the very next bothering stimulus that comes your way. In that moment, remember what you've learned here and choose differently. Remember, your response is your power. Your mind is your sovereignty. Your peace is your responsibility. The question is no longer whether things will happen that could bother you. They will. The question is who will decide how you feel, the world or you? I choose me. And I invite you to do the same. Stand tall like the bamboo. Bend but don't break. And when the storm passes, as all storms eventually do, return to your position of strength, unbothered by what you've weathered, strengthened by what you've overcome. Your unbothered life begins with your next response. Choose wisely.